Thank you for joining us for this forum short on Latino farm worker well-being. Forum shorts are part of the Idaho Environmental Forum's efforts to bring you important conversations related to the environment during COVID. You can find out more by going to idahoenvironmentalforum.org and clicking the link Forum Shorts. My name is Jen Schneider. I'm a professor in the School of Public Service at Boise State and an IEF board member. I'm joined today by 4 guests, all from Boise State. Cynthia Curl, Associate Professor of Community and Environmental Health, Lisa Morato, Assistant Professor, School of Public Service, Rebecca Sam Castellano, Associate Professor, Sociology, and Chris Torres, PhD candidate in Public Policy and Administration. This group has been working on several research projects related to understanding well-being among Latina farm workers in southwestern Idaho. They focus both on how Latina farm workers view well-being and on analyzing factors that influence their well-being in the home and at work. Thanks so much to you all for being here and for sharing some information about this research with us. So Rebecca, we're going to start with you. Can you tell us about what motivated this research to begin with?
Yeah, many years back, Lisa and I started discussing some common research interests. And it started as a pretty kind of casual conversation, but over time we found that our backgrounds were really converging on a desire to learn more about the experiences of farm workers in our region, and particularly interested in certain aspects of their well-being. And so we started to engage in some field work, and sometimes that meant literally going out to the field. And as we did that, we noticed that there seemed to be more and more women engaging in farm work. And at the same time, as we dug into literature, we found that women were really not well represented in the literature. And at the same time, we know that also in general, agricultural workers tend to be pretty invisible in society. And so we were really motivated to try to elevate the lived experiences of these women that we were witnessing, and also try to understand more deeply what the experiences of women in particular were. At the same time, we had been having discussions with Cindy about common interests. And over time, we really started to think about how the work that she does, which is so valuable, could add such a really wonderful dimension and component to the work that we had been starting. So I would say that the motivation for the work was both kind of academic, wanting to add to the scholarly literature on a topic that's really not well represented, and also just in our own community, wanting to shed more light on the experiences of people that are a part of our region that are often kind of not well represented.
So Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about the different types of data you collected and who you talked to when you started the project?
Yeah, so when we embarked on the Latina Health Disparities Project, we came together as an interdisciplinary team, and we put together a really mixed method approach to data collection. In terms of recruitment, we really worked with a lot of community partners, social service agencies that were already working with farm workers, Head Start programs, healthcare services, and we were able to recruit women to our study through connections that we've made in the community in previous years, and by drawing upon our relationships with community partners. And so, it's really important to say that we couldn't have done this research without our community partners. We put together a mixed method project. So what that involved was interviews, surveys, focus groups, and pesticide biomonitoring. And so for the surveys, we went to different community meetings, and we went to different community events, and we gave out a total of 70 surveys. These are pretty comprehensive surveys asking women questions about their physical well-being, their social well-being, their emotional well-being, and questions about their work experiences in farm work. The focus groups we did at 5 different locations around southwestern Idaho. We did most of them in community centers, We held one in a restaurant, and there we invited women to come in and just talk more in depth about their perceptions of their own well-being and how they defined well-being. And those were really incredible conversations to have with women. Along with all of this, we conducted in-depth interviews with women in their homes or at other locations, and that gave us a chance to talk in depth, usually for about an hour with women about their life experiences. And we also conducted interviews with farm worker advocates. And then the last part of the project involved collection of urine samples for biomonitoring of pesticide exposure. And we conducted all of these different methods simultaneously. It was incredibly complex trying to navigate all of these different components, but we had an awesome research team, and we were able to collect all of this incredible data with women that really hadn't had a chance to have their voices heard up until this point.
Simi, what were some of the important findings from the study?
Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to do with this study was not make our own assumptions about the challenges and the barriers to well-being in this population. We really wanted to begin by letting women tell us about their experiences. And so through a combination of the results we got from the surveys, which Lisa mentioned, we had 70 of those. We did these 5 focus groups with 22 women and then did 11 of these hour-long semi-structured interviews. We found some common themes that emerged, both in terms of challenges to well-being that occurred in kind of the home and kind of personal sphere, and then challenges that were really related to work and the more public sphere. In terms of the private sphere, the challenges that really rose to the surface centered around food security and food provisioning. So anxieties about kind of having enough food to feed the family, and then also the work and the labor involved in, making those meals available to the family on a consistent basis, childcare responsibilities, challenges with balancing the long hours and the schedules that are not typical that go along with working in agricultural work, and then also themes around social isolation, around being in these rural communities and trying to feel connected. And then in terms of the more public or work-related sphere, there were concerns kind of related about the long hours of farm work that really emerged from some of these conversations. And then also about fears about pesticide exposures and about maybe not having sufficient regulatory protections. So there are some legal things that are required to protect farm workers, like having hand washing facilities or places to decontaminate if they are exposed to pesticides, that weren't always in place or that people had concerns about. And then as part of this mixed method approach, we were also collecting these urine samples that Lisa mentioned, which we were able to collect from 29 of the 70 women who completed the surveys. And I think what was interesting about adding that component was that we were able to see that some of these concerns that women expressed about pesticide exposures were quite valid. We found that 5 of the women, of the 29 women who provided urine samples, reported that they worked as pesticide handlers, so they were actually mixing, loading, or applying pesticides. And of all of the urine samples that we collected, the 4 highest exposures were among 4 of those 5 women during the agricultural spray season. And those exposures were significantly higher than the rest of the cohort and were higher than what we often see in male farm workers or even in farm working populations in other countries that have less regulations. And so we have some hypotheses around the idea that women may not be getting the same training as men. In fact, that's what they reported in some of their surveys, that they may not be getting pesticide training that should be required by law, and that they may not be getting personal protective equipment that's sized for them, right? Because women aren't the same size as their male counterparts. And so I think by being able to look at these issues from some different viewpoints, we are able to kind of bring a different lens to this and find some areas that we want to focus on in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Chris, you were a student on the project, and then you also functioned as a translator for the project. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the challenges, practical challenges you faced doing this work?
Yes. Lisa alluded to some of them already. The first one that comes to mind has to do with recruitment of Latina farm workers to join us in these focus groups or interviews, or to just be able to find places convenient to them to hand out the surveys. Even though we started making great relationships with community partners, we were outsiders. So coming into these communities, these tight-knit communities, and asking them to be a part of this and kind of create those relationships with individuals and small groups of Latina farm workers was a real challenge to sort of demonstrate that we wanted to help and that we wanted to make it worth their time and not ask too much of their time, since, as Cynthia already mentioned, they already have so many, from what we found out, they have so many things on taking from their time and from their day. So we really wanted to make sure that our attempts to know about this community, this group, doesn't add on to their burden. The second thing, at least for me, and I know most of us share this during the course of our project, was our positionality in all this. While I'm Mexican American, I'm light-skinned. Spanish is my first language, but I have a bit of an accent. So you have a light-skinned Mexican American male asking Latina farm workers that are either younger than me, same age as me, or much older than me, sometimes pretty personal questions, or them sharing with me some pretty personal details of their lives and how them being farm workers impacts their lives. So trying to make sure that I'm being respectful as possible, translating things as accurately as possible without changing or adding or mixing up their experience. So that was a real challenge for me, and I think for most of us in general.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I think a lot of times we see the results from these studies, and those of us who are outsiders to them don't often think about the mechanics of how they were done. So appreciate you sharing that. If people want to learn more about your work, Idaho Environmental Forum has linked to a 4-page white paper folks can find on the website, and that has your contact information. And all of our panelists today have agreed to put their email addresses in there, so if you want to contact them for more information, you can do that. I want to thank you so much for participating in this forum short today. It's a fascinating project. We appreciate your work and your voices, and for being part of Forum Shorts with Idaho Environmental Forum.